All right. Welcome back to another Solar Surge live training. Hey, folks, we're here every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on a 1 hour live call to deliver maximum value on the sales training. And so, what this program is all about is giving you the information that you need to build a successful career in solar sales. At this point, I'd like to bring on my co-host here, Dan Freshley, usually here riding shotgun with me on the live trainings. Of course, Dan is the CEO and founder of Radiant Solar, one of the largest independent solar dealers here on the East Coast. And so Dan is going to be able to share a lot of perspective that he's had in building his business, whether it be doing in-home sales, virtual, door-to-door, you name it. He's had a chance to see this industry from a number of different angles. So Dan, good to see you again, man. Welcome back to the live training.
Always fun. It's good to be here and looking forward to getting some in-person time next week. Maybe we'll talk a little more about that on the call, but good to see you.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, man, things are really gearing up towards RE Plus. For those of you who are new in the industry, RE Plus is it's the solar industry event. It's where all the who's who of the manufacturers, the sales companies, the installers, pretty much everyone is there, as well as the policy influencers. And that's a big thing as well, because we had a lot of changes in our industry this year. There's a lot more attention on the solar industry this year. Unfortunately, because I think a lot of folks looked at it like this was just a gold rush, and a lot of folks rushed into solar, not necessarily using the best practices. And now, like many other industries, as we mature, there's going to be more regulation and more oversight. So I'm sure that's going to be a lot of what we're discussing out in Las Vegas next week.
Yeah, I think it's
But
also
anyway,
an interesting point too, just to not get too off topic, but to spin off of what you're talking about there. A lot of what's, I think, taken place in the industry derives from the sales side, which is really what this whole live training, the weekly calls that we do, Solar Surge University is all in place for. Look, guys, I mean, those of you that are listening that are either new to sales, want to get into solar sales, or maybe just aren't getting enough training and support from wherever you are, what Joe and I are really trying to set out to do here with Solar Surge University and these live training calls is to bring professionalism back to solar sales, and to do it from a high level, high caliber, high intent, high knowledge base standpoint. So I'm intrigued while we're out there, Joe, just to see what regulatory conversations are going on. I know there's been things floated about, will the, FTC regulate how sales is done in solar, similar to what was done years ago in the car industry and stuff. So curious to just kind of hear and see as we talk and hear things mingling, what might happen and what might come. But for those of you that are tuned in here, you're at the right place, because we do it professionally and you don't have anything to worry about if you kind of follow the practices that we recommend and coach and teach. So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we're all about education and transparency. And that's why we put these trainings out on a live public stream. I mean, we actually have our solar homeowner clients that will log in and watch these sales trainings as well. And I actually encourage that, because I want them to know that when we talk about, hey, we're big on education, we're big on information. Yes, we want to earn your business, but we're not doing it some kind of, trick them or, some kind of shady way where you're trying to, withhold information from the buyer. We want them to have as much information as possible and to choose to work with us, because we can help them sort through all those different options and ultimately get the system that's going to work best for them.
Yeah. And I know in some recent, sorry, Joe, but I know in some recent weeks as well, I've used the recorded versions of these calls, right? So obviously, hopefully you're tuning in live every week, but if not, this will live on the YouTube channel under the live, section as well. But I've had some conversations in recent weeks with homeowners that were asking about sizing inverters. Well, hey, great. Go back and watch from 2 weeks ago where we talked about the IQ system, and how to design an Enphase IQ system, and the microinverters, or maybe it was about batteries or whatever it is. So these live trainings, for those of you that are watching live, and also use them as resources, go back to them later, tune back in. Maybe you missed it live in the moment, but there's still some great content that we've talked about over the past handful of weeks.
Yep. And that's the power of content too, because you record it once and then you can repurpose it and reuse it and reference it back as many times, as you need to, which is especially important if you're building your team and training your team, kind of like what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get into today's topic. So in today's topic, we're talking about how to overcome the common objections that come up during the solar sales process. And I know a lot of times I say, hey, look, I don't sell anything. I'm not a salesman. The reality of it is that if I've done my professional consultative sales process properly, then I should have got to the point where I understand exactly what the homeowner is trying to achieve. I've been able to put together the correct system that meets that homeowner's needs and goals. And now it's time to actually get going, get the project started, right? Because until we close on a transaction, there can be no exchange of value, right? I can't do anything for my client until we have a signed work order, and maybe if we have to get financing set up. So although I'm not big on being salesy or being pushy or anything like that, we do have to overcome objections, which means to address homeowners' concerns and then ultimately get the deal signed so we can get the project started. So I've got about 4 or 5 objections that I know I hear frequently. Dan, what would you say are the top objections that you hear, or I should say the top homeowner concerns that need to be addressed before you can move forward with a solar project?
Yeah. Obviously, if you're talking about just what things they need to know, or they're going to want to have answers to, the first part of it is again, what does this system do for me, right? So maybe there's some objections that get brought up in that conversation as well, of just, hey, there's an exchange of value taking place, right? Just like you were saying, Joe. And I also want to make sure, I want to preface this training as well with what we're saying, guys. When we say we don't sell solar. Of course we sell solar, but what Joe is really insinuating is that the clients that are coming to us because they're looking for expert advice. They're looking for expert guidance. And so we don't necessarily need to do the selling, which a lot of people perceive as convincing you of something that you didn't want. We're not doing that. People are coming to us because they're informed, they're educated, they just want to work with a professional, right? We've used the analogy, they're going to see a doctor because they're looking for a diagnosis or a way to get better. That's kind of where people are coming to us from as well. But there is still certainly a sale element, right? Just because we propose a solution and give a product to somebody doesn't mean that they're just going to sign on a dotted line and they're going to lay down and you're not going to have to ask for the business. You certainly are. And there's a tactful way to do it where by the end of the process, a lot of times maybe it's them insinuating, hey, okay, what are the next steps? How do I get started? Where do I go from here? But there's also a means that we sort of guide somebody through that journey. But when we get into the questions that you were talking about, Joe, I mean, obviously, number one, they need to know, what is the system going to do for them? That could be, how does it help them save money? How does it help them prepare for an emergency, for a disaster, for whatever things are important to them? How does it make an environmental impact and benefit if that's one of their main objectives, right? So they need to know how that works. Of course, there's going to be a cost element. There's always a cost. But the number one thing that you'll probably hear us talk about here too, guys, is that price sounds like the logical thing that someone is supposed to object over. Oh, the price is too high, or oh, the price is this or that. The reality of it is that we as human beings make emotionally driven decisions, right? We feel upset because we lost power. Maybe I'm a Texan and I lost power due to the snow and ice storms years ago. And I remember the painful moments of what that was like. And, the reality of it is I'm looking into solar and battery because I want to avoid that happening again. So as you get into the engagement, they might say, oh, the price is too high. That's just a way of kind of trying to address the elephant in the room, if you will, or pulling out an objection when there wasn't really another one. So sometimes you just have to find a way to properly combat that and say, hey, look, I understand, but go back and reiterate and remind them of the pain point of what occurred, or maybe the financial issue that happened. Hey, you had a couple $1,000s of meats in the fridge that you had to throw out. Your kids were XYZ, whatever the scenario is. So the price point is probably a good first place to sort of kick off because it's the lowest hanging fruit of, oh yeah, let me object because of price. And we can kind of unpack more of those, Joe, but I think that's maybe a good first one to start with.
Sure. And this is, yes, this is the one that you're going to hear the most, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is actually the issue. Dan, as you said, going back to the discovery, right? All professional selling starts with needs analysis. And by the way, guys, if you haven't got this already, grab the free download. There should be a link right below in the video. This is the 3-step virtual sales process that we use here at Solar Surge. It's the same process I use personally. And so the first step in that process is needs analysis, identifying the homeowner's goals, pain points, hot button issues, right? Because that's what we're going to be designing towards. That's what we're going to be pitching towards, is solving these problems. So you have to start there. But also part of the sales presentation, and again, those who are in Solar Surge University, you'll have already seen this, but part of the sales presentation has to start with showing them the cost of doing nothing. Because the reality of this is, unless the home is just covered with trees and there's no, that's covered with shade, there's no real solar access. But assuming that the home is a good solar candidate home, if they can afford to stick with the power company, they can afford to go solar with you. So although price might be the issue that the prospect uses to kind of push off because they're not ready to make a buying decision yet, it's not really the issue. I think the issue might be that there's some other concerns that haven't been addressed yet, and they're just not ready to make that commitment. Because if they can afford to stick with the power company, they should be able to afford going solar with you. Dan, I'll throw it back over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, I'm gonna comment and address that here real quick. But hey, Robert, thanks for the comment here. Just so you know, when we talk about this particular training, some of these things might be specifically sales, but it could also be technical objections that we might run into during the sales process as well. So if you have questions about technical things, thanks for the comment here. But if you have questions about technical objections that you've been hit during a sales process, drop them in the comments. We're happy to jump in and address those. But yeah, Joe, to your point there, we call it, kill the bill. If you follow the 3-step process that we've got, guys, that Joe just mentioned, probably linked in the description, we go over that from the very beginning of, you have to properly present your solar system solution. And that could be regular solar, no battery, or with battery, by first preparing the homeowner to understand, look, you have a cost regardless. Frankly, I think that's one of the beautiful things about solar. And as a professional salesperson, I sometimes laugh at how kind of humorous or beautiful it is to work in an industry where we have a product that we're offering that every single homeowner in America already has an expense for, right? Like, we have to kind of fully grasp that idea, guys. Like, when someone goes and buys a car and they have a certain price point and a certain budget, but they love this BMW or whatever it is, they might be willing to rationalize in their mind how they can afford another $500 increase in payment. But that's a $500 increase in cost that they did not have yesterday, that when they took the keys today, they just took on. When someone goes solar, that's not the case. And that's why we don't encourage, and we strongly disagree with the concept of this free advertising. But I was having this conversation with a gentleman over the weekend as well. And they said, yeah, what about this whole free thing? I was like, look, it's not true. There's nothing such as a free solar system. But the reality of it is that every single person, rich or poor, it doesn't matter who you are, has a monthly utility bill expense. And you cannot ever get rid of that monthly bill expense unless you go solar, right? That's part of the conversation here. So you have to conceptualize the fact that we're offering a product literally that does not financially negatively impact anyone's budget, right? People are used to spending extra money. In this case, more times than not, when they go solar, they're going to be spending less money. We're actually putting money back into their pocket on maybe a monthly financing basis, maybe monthly leasing basis, but especially if we look at it over an extended period of time. So I remember, like, when that really clicked for me, Joe, back when you and I were first together years and years and years ago, I was like, man, the product that we're offering, that I'm so-called selling, is a product that, frankly, for most high-level sales professionals, would kind of look at it and be like, this is a no-brainer, right? It's an easy sale because you're just trading one monthly payment for another, or one cost for another. So just something to kind of know there, guys. Like, when you understand that part of it and you can articulate that to a homeowner, like, look, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, you have this expense. I'm just here to help you. Number one, save money, hopefully on a monthly basis. But number two, as your costs would otherwise continue to increase, because we can agree, right, that costs are going to go up. We can agree that bills are only ever going to increase, not decrease, correct? Get them unified in that. Okay, great. Well, here's what that looks like for you. Year 1, year 5, year 10, 20, 25, whatever it may be. And here's how much money you would have saved on average per month over the life of your solar system. That's where solar becomes a really beautiful thing from a financial perspective.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you're going to find in the solar surge approach is that most of these common objections, we're handling them preemptively before the homeowner has to raise the issue. So it's not like we're surprised at the end, like, oh, they think the price is high. It's like, no, we know that there's going to be a concern over price. And that's why before we even present our offer, we have to show them what they're already on the hook for.
Exactly.
And that's the case, is that, sticking with the power company is the worst thing they can do. And if you can unpack that, and again, we can look at some other materials, or for those of you who are in Solar Surge University, you can look at some of the live recordings of my presentations. And that's typically the first thing I present is, hey, this is where we are right now. And my goal is to get you out of that situation and put you in a position where you can be more self-sufficient with your energy needs.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's no insult to any client that we ever work with, and I'm not trying to insult their intelligence when we go through that and almost kind of slow it down. But the reality of it is we're so used to just, hey, my monthly power bill costs me $200 a month, and I just pay it, right? It's just I've been paying it for 15 years, 20 years, whatever it may be, and the bill is going to come again next month, and I'm going to pay it, and it's going to come again the next month, and I'm going to pay it. So we have to kind of pause and just say, like, hey, hold on, how much money do you think you've spent over your lifetime so far on this utility bill? And I remember one of the early trainings I heard years ago was, and I use this analogy, so this might be helpful for the sales professionals listening. I'll say, hey, look, the only bills that we can never get rid of in our lives ever are going to be our taxes and our utilities. There's no means of getting rid of them, right? You can own your house free and clear. You can own your car free and clear. Or I should also say maybe insurances, right? You could opt to not have insurance, but that might not be wise. But taxes and utilities, right? You can't negotiate with the utility company, the electric company, and say, hey, I don't like your pricing. Give me a better deal. If you don't like your phone bill from Verizon, you can shop it and go to AT&T. Or if you don't like your, even your mortgage rate, if you don't like your mortgage, you can go get a new one. But your utility, most of the time, in most states, not everywhere, you have one provider. There's nothing you can do about that provider. They're going to send you a bill every month, and you're expected that you have to pay it. So water, gas, electric, sewer, whatever it may be, you just don't have another option. And that's where solar is beautiful. It's like, no, you finally do have another option, which is go solar, own your energy instead of wasting that money every month in perpetuity, on the utility company.
Yep. And again, all that should come out during discovery, right? You should be getting the homeowner. And again, if you don't have it, grab the free download, because we have all the discovery interview questions that we typically use. But one of the questions we simply ask is, how much are you paying right now? Right? Get the homeowner telling you exactly what their energy expense already is. And then when you come back with your kill the bill presentation, you're going to take that and then extrapolate it out 20 or 25 years and show them how bad it really is with over the long term with inflation and everything else.
Yeah,
so,
I think
so
for
again,
what it's worth, just real quick there, Joe, for those that are maybe wondering, we typically are showing a 4% annual escalation. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. There's softwares, you can make an Excel file, but we typically show a 4% annual escalation because that is what the historical previous 10, 15 years has shown as a national average. Now, in certain markets and certain utilities, there's obviously been significantly higher or lower numbers. So we first show them that. But one of the things I also do is I say, hey, look, even if you don't agree, because sometimes someone will push back and be like, oh, I don't think it's 4%. Okay, well, this is data from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. But okay, if we are dismissing their credibility, we'll just say, even if your rate doesn't increase, what's your average bill today? $200? Okay, 200 times 300 months, 25 years. Here's how much you would spend if rates do not go up at all. Can you agree that that's probably unrealistic? They'll say more than likely yes. But even if it didn't go up at all, and you compare that number versus your solar investment, the solar investment's still less money. 9 times out of 10, it's still going to be less money. And that's with a very drastic, not apples to apples comparison. So I just wanted to kind of give some real tangible feedback to anybody here that's wondering the numbers or how we do the calculation. Take their bill, times it by 300 months. Here's how much they'd spend if rates don't go up at all. And compare that to your solar cost. You're still probably saving tens of thousands of dollars, even after that equation.
Exactly. And by the way, guys, I should have made an announcement earlier on, but we do have the live stream, the comments coming in here on the dashboard live. So if you have a question or a comment that you would like to have an answer to right now, just go ahead and post a comment on the YouTube video or on the Facebook post, and we're going to do our best to get those up here on the screen and get answers to you. I see that guy from Arizona had a question here, and this actually goes back to a topic that we taught on, I believe it was last week. Yeah. Where we taught on how solar panels have 2 different types of power ratings. They have STC power ratings, which is basically laboratory conditions, perfect ideal lab conditions, and then NMOT ratings. That acronym stands for normal module operating temperature. But you could think of that as just real world conditions. So what's the real world condition rating on the panel? And oftentimes the power and the output is going to be less in real world conditions versus what you could get it to do in a perfect ideal laboratory setting. So to answer your question, that guy from Arizona, if you're using a proper design software, that the design software, when it does its modeling, it's going to take into account all of those factors. It's going to take into account temperature, DC to AC conversion losses, any losses related to the wiring within the house, any losses related to roof pitch and orientation. So all that is factored in there. It's not like we're having to present to the homeowner, hey, here's the real world rating and here's the laboratory rating. When we present an energy production forecast to the homeowner, and of course, we use the Aurora software here. We've done another training on that previously. It's already taking into account all those factors and discounting those out so that the number that we present to the homeowner, the actual energy offset forecast, we know that that is an accurate as can be, take it to the bank number.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, one other comment here, Joe, just as we're addressing a couple, this question here. So how do you get power in the nighttime? Great question. One thing that sometimes people don't understand is how that relationship works. Sometimes I think, I don't see this as much common, now, Joe, but it used to be where people sort of thought like, okay, because I went solar, I no longer am connected to the grid at all. Like, am I relying only on solar? No, that's not the case. The way it would work is that your solar system interfaces with your home directly so that during daytime, as you're producing electricity, the energy feeds into power appliances. And then sometimes if you have net metering, you're going to export that energy back out to the grid as a credit, which means at nighttime, you can either pull from the utility grid the same way you do now and use that credit, or in some states where you might have a battery system, you would have stored that energy in the battery instead of sending it to the grid, and you can pull from the battery. But the grid is still there. The grid is still connected. You can still pull from the grid as needed. In a worst case scenario, if you had bad solar production, not enough ample charge in your battery, you can still pull from the grid the exact same way you would before going solar. The goal, though, is that if your system was sized right, you're just not financially obligated to have to buy energy from the utility grid if it can be avoided.
Correct. And thank you for that, guys. Keep the questions coming. So to get back to the first question here, if I put this objection back on the screen, which is the price is too high, right? I think there's multiple phases for how you want to answer this objection. The first is to preempt it at the end of your discovery interview. So remember, your discovery, this is the first meeting, the first interaction you're having with the homeowner. And once you've gotten through all the requirements and the needs analysis, I like to end with what I have here on the document as closing questions. And so one of the closing questions I like to use is this, which is, if I'm able to get you what you need at the right price, is there any reason that we can't do the project together? Is there anything holding us up? And what you're trying to identify here is anything that's potentially blocking the project, but it's intentionally worded as at the right price, not at the lowest price, but at the right price. Is there any reason that we couldn't do the project together? And then usually they'll bite on that soft close and say, oh, no, there's no reason. That we're just looking for looking for the best price. We're looking for the best deal. And so, okay, great. So you've gotten their buy-in there. Then when you're actually making your sales presentation in the next phase, we already talked about, you start with kill the bill. So you show them how much they're going to be paying anyway, right? So the implication there is, okay, so that they can, of course, afford solar. Then you're also going to be explaining to them why you chose the equipment that you chose and why it's not the cheapest equipment. So again, for those of you who have watched my live sales call recordings, you'll notice that when I'm presenting a particular solution, I'll throw a line in there like, the reason I chose this product compared to some of the cheaper options is because this product will give you XYZ benefit. Maybe it's a longer warranty, or maybe it's more power or more capacity. But I'm already sort of framing it that I'm not going with the cheapest option, and here's why, because here's the benefits that I want you to have from what I'm choosing for you. So that's number two. You've already kind of preemptively let them know that this is not going to be the cheapest price, the lowest price quote. But then the third thing that I advise that you do, and we might be able to unpack this a little bit more if we have time, but the third thing I advise you to do is let them know how you vet your installation partners, how you choose your actual solar installer, and why they're the best partner to work with, why they're the most reliable. And frankly, educate them a little bit on just how frequent it is that solar companies go out of business and why you really don't want to shop for your contractor based on cheapest price. And folks, if you're a homeowner out there, you probably know that anyway. If you're doing any kind of home improvement, or home, maybe building an expansion on your home, putting a swimming pool on your home, you generally don't want to shop for a contractor based on cheapest price. But unfortunately, there's a lot of solar marketing out there that's encouraging homeowners that all solar is the same and just shop on price when nothing could be further from the truth. You are interviewing a contractor to do a major construction project on your home. And that's the approach that you should take. It's not just, hey, what's the cheapest price I can get today? It's who do I want to be married to for the next 25 years on this warranty? Dan, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, that's a great point too, because it's important that when you're addressing that part of the conversation, guys, sometimes you just need to be able to lay out a couple of reasons why, right? Just remind a homeowner of these are the certain reasons why we work with XYZ company, right? And most people will agree or will acknowledge and know that, okay, we're working with a company that has certain profitability standards, right? They have to be profitable, right? Because at the end of the day, if they're selling at price points that cannot be sustained long term, that's going to lead to the company going out of business. And who does that hurt? Well, you as the homeowner that's going solar with them, and the possible thousands of others that went solar with them. So they have to be profitable. They have to allocate, and in part of that profitability, they need to be allocating money towards essentially service coffers or service, repairs that are inevitably going to happen. That's an area that I see new contractors don't do properly, is they don't allocate money for every single project, every single one, because not every single one's going to have a problem, but one project might have a big problem, and they have to pull money from that service bucket to fund that stuff. So you kind of have to remind them of, hey, we have the operational expenses, offices, insurance, livable, not just basic, but very quality livable wages for the install crews that are working on these projects. Because you can't just pull some person from the Home Depot parking lot and expect them to know how to install these systems properly, right? Like they need to be many times licensed or have to have certain minimum educations and criteria to be able to do these projects. So if you just kind of reiterate some of those points back to them, and the important thing to do, and I do it a lot, I think it's just naturally, but you'll notice oftentimes I'm shaking my head, right? Like I'm telling you subliminally, you're supposed to say yes to what I'm saying, right? That's just a basic sales tip, right? It's mirroring, it's body language. And so when I'm saying these things, I'm saying yes, like, oh, I'm supposed to agree with that. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Of course. So just important that we draw that distinction and that you clarify why you're choosing this company. Yeah, there's cheaper options. Of course there are, but you're not driving the cheapest car either. You're not living in the cheapest house. So let's make sure that your solar system is not the cheapest option as well.
Exactly. And remember, guys, price is almost never the real issue. It's just the most convenient objection that the homeowner can use to kind of put some space between themselves and the decision, right? But Dan's absolutely right. You've got to get them to buy into that premise of, no, I shouldn't be shopping to get the cheapest equipment. No, I should not be shopping to get the cheapest contractor. I should be getting the best or the most quality that's going to meet my needs, both on the installation labor side and on the equipment itself. And so they should buy into that. They definitely should. If they don't buy into that, they may not be the client to work with anyway, because there are some folks out there that they are just cheap. They're just cheap, and it's never, whatever you give them is never cheap enough, and it's never good enough, and they're complaining all the time. So in certain rare cases, you may want to just walk away and say, look, this may not be the right project for me, or I may not be the right person to work with for this. But I would say for 95% of solar prospects, they don't want the cheapest contractor. They don't want the cheapest equipment. They just want to make sure that they're making the right decision. And so that's where the building confidence comes in. And the more that you can explain what Dan was just explaining, like explaining, for example, why some solar companies go out of business and why the companies that you partner with likely will not, that's going to demonstrate your expert knowledge of the industry. And again, it's just going to further separate you from the competition who haven't done their homework, who don't know the industry as well. And so again, that's why we're here sharing all this with you. Dan,
Absolutely.
I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, just to address a couple comments that have come in here. So Ryan mentioned this toward the beginning, but yeah, all these live training calls here are going to be on the YouTube channel under the live tab. So go back once this video is done. You can watch back through anything that you might have missed, and go back to maybe old ones too for anybody else that's watching that hasn't caught up with any of the lives up to this point. You had another question here, Ryan, about how does Aurora, Open Solar, Solo compare? I think we talked maybe very briefly about this in our Aurora training that we did many weeks ago, but the underlying source of all of this information comes from NREL's PV watts calculator. So you can go online, just Google PV watts calculator. That's the basis to all of those softwares. Now, what Aurora does particularly well compared to some of the others is the ability to program in using LiDAR, shading trees, chimneys, vent pipes, things of that sort, and get a really good shading analysis. So that's one of the reasons why we prefer Aurora, is just to have that slightly higher technical accuracy. But at the end of the day, you could use totally free, just go to the PV watts calculator, type in some information, azimuth, tilt, the DC wattage of your system, and you're going to get a production number. It'll show you monthly productions. So that's just kind of a quick calculator tool that's just free and open source online to be able to utilize that. And then lastly here too as well, Leo, this is a great question. So currently, unless, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, none of the current financing companies offer the ability to refinance to lower rates in the future. Now, there are some loan products out there that do multiple reamortizations. So reamortization is essentially just sort of recasting or recalculating your monthly payment. One of the nice things about the loans that do offer that is that your interest rate, particularly for those maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that might have had 0.99 or 1.99% financing, they can actually reissue their monthly payment at a later time if they wanted to put $5,000 more down. So let's imagine 2 years go by, you've got $5,000 and you're like, you know what? I want to go ahead and put this towards my solar loan, help pay the solar loan off faster, but I also want to issue myself a new monthly payment in the process. That's what the reamortization does. It doesn't reset the rate and it doesn't reset the loan term. It just gives them a new payment, but refinancing it isn't the case. Now, when I've handled that as an objection before, I've said, hey, look, there are a lot of personal loan options out there. If you, especially in today's environment, we might start off some of our clients with some of the loan options that are available today that are at higher interest rates because there's no fees or penalty or closing costs, things of that sort built into the loan. But then I'll also recommend, hey, in a year from now, 2 years from now, if home equity line of credits get better or other personal loans improve, and you have the ability to get a 499 loan with no cost, you can always take that loan, use this. The loans we offer have no prepayment penalties. So you can take the other loan, pay off this loan, and you effectively refinanced. It just is a new loan at that time. So something to kind of keep in mind there, Leo.
Yep. And what you're going to find too on most solar loan options is that optional reamortization, because what most people are using that for is to get the tax credit, right? Most people are not going to receive the solar tax credit for 12 to maybe 18 months after they install the solar system, because they have to get to the end of the year, file their tax return, and then hopefully get that full credit back and then be able to pass that on to the finance company. So that's why these solar loans offer the reamortizations. But as Dan said, it doesn't change the rate or the term. It just recalculates the monthly payment based on whatever the balance is after you apply that. Think of it like a deferred down payment.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Also on that note, just to touch on kind of what's going on in the world of solar finance right now, I would say outside of Florida, the conventional solar financing options are really not that great in the marketplace right now. The interest rates, the aggressive interest rate hikes from the central bank have really affected how solar finance works. And I think we actually kind of got double hit because rates rose so fast. Our fees have had to rise to catch up to the current rate, but also to kind of pay back for some of the loans that the finance companies already had on their books as the rates were rising, right? Because now they're kind of losing for some of these loans that they had to hold on for too long. They thought they were going to be able to sell them at a higher price than they can sell them. So a lot of that is being passed on in the form of higher closing costs for new loan originations. So we're actually going to be doing some more learning, but also some training in the future on how to sell solar leases, because in today's high interest rate environment, the way I'm reading it, I do believe that the solar lease is the more favorable way to finance your solar system right now. And we've got some very, very low rates that we're seeing right now in some of our biggest markets like Texas and Florida. So hopefully we'll have a lot more to share with you all on that in a future training, and we can really kind of dig into the economics of the solar lease. But I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of that in the market in general, and also hear from Solar Surge.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note just on that topic that the closing costs, we call them closing costs, but just so people understand essentially how it works is that the banks are saying, hey, there's a certain amount of money we need to make on this project over a certain period of time. We're going to make that money if we offer you a 3.99, 4.99% interest rate, but charge you a really high closing cost, right? Because we're going to make it from you up front. Or we're going to give you a 10%, 11% interest rate, but have no closing costs. And we're going to hope that you pay for that for 25 years. If you run both of those simulations side by side, they pencil to be within like $1,000 of one another. Now, what we typically are advising today is to a lot of our clients, hey, take the higher interest rate because you have a significantly lower total loan or total contract price where you're actually rewarded for paying the system off faster because the bank is hoping you'll take 25 years and that's how they're going to make their money. If you pay this off in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, you'll actually save yourself quite a bit of money. Even though the interest rate's higher, you'll save yourself quite a bit of money compared to the other option where the interest rate was low, but the contract price was significantly higher. Another thing to know here, guys, too, the reason why rates work the way they do in solar is most all the solar financing are unsecured loans. So the bank is not collateralizing these solar systems with liens against your property, things like that. If there was a security interest that gives the bank better peace of mind, they probably would have lower rates if they were collateralizing it. But because they're not, that's just one of the reasons why rates tend to run a little bit higher as well.
Yep. All right, well, let's move along here. We got about 25 minutes left, 24 minutes left. Let's take a look at some of these other objections. So this is one that I hear from time to time, which is I need to get 2 or 3 more quotes. In fact, I probably hear this more often than I don't, which is I need to get 2 or 3 more quotes. Most homeowners are advised. In fact, some states like California even make the homeowner sign a disclosure acknowledging that they got at least 2 or 3 estimates before making a decision. But this is pretty typical you're going to find with selling anything to homeowners, anything of significant value or significant price point, that they're going to want to get a couple of other comparison points to compare. Now, again, going back to the Solar Surge sales process, handling this objection goes all the way back to starting at your discovery. Right. So one of your discovery interview questions ought to be, have you ever met with another company about solar? Or have you ever gotten a quote for solar from another company? Now, more often than not, when I ask that question, the answer is yes. So I typically will hear, yes, I've got 1 or 2, or somebody came, knocked on my door, gave me a proposal. And so then you want to follow up immediately with, okay, great. So what prevented you from going forward with one of those other options? And again, let the homeowner tell you why they didn't choose your competition. Right now, the standard response is what's on the screen here. I just always get 3 quotes. But the reality of it is there's something that they did not get. Maybe it was a lack of confidence. Maybe they just weren't quite sure if the equipment was right. But for whatever reason, they just did not have enough buying desire or enough confidence to go forward with a proposal that was there. And so if you can get them to extrapolate on that, oftentimes you can learn some keys to putting together a winning proposal, deficiencies that your competitor had where you can outshine them. So again, make sure you ask that question, guys, during the discovery process. It's just going to put you in a stronger position because, again, it's the homeowner hearing out of his or her own mouth why they didn't go with your competitor, why they didn't have confidence in your competitor. And it's giving you potentially some ammunition of things that you can do, how you can craft your proposal to best meet their needs. But then, go ahead, Dan. I'll let you take it from
Just
here.
wanted to chime in there real quick, Joe. One of the things, and for those of you that are already in Solar Surge University or want to be part of the Solar Surge dealer program that we have, one thing that I know that I've done is again, discovery start there. Hey, are you interested in getting multiple quotes? The way that we operate here, and I oftentimes refer to this and tell people is, hey, I'm very much an independent broker, right? I have the ability to help offer you a variety of different products depending on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for multiple quotes, you can get multiple quotes with me, right? I can show you the solutions you're looking for. I have a gentleman I was working with down in Florida recently where he wanted to look at one battery option and another battery option. And with both of those companies, there was different solar panels, different inverters, things changed a little bit, but he was effectively getting 2 quotes from 2 totally separate companies, but I'm able to help facilitate that. And really, again, if you position yourself properly, the way that I know we do here at Solar Surge as the trusted expert, it's almost like I'm your insurance agent. I'm just helping you find the best solution for you or a financial advisor, the best investment strategy for you. You don't need to go and interview multiple advisors. We just need to figure out what the best strategy is for you based on your goals and objectives. And so if you, again, I think like you said, Joe, if you come with the right amount of confidence and the right amount of knowledge and experience, and that really shows, they're probably not going to be looking for somewhere else. They want to do business with you, and they're going to take your recommendation and your advice and use that, appropriately in their decision making. So just something worth chiming in on how I handle that question sometimes is great. If you need another quote, you can get it from me, right? You can shop with me. Let me help you do that. And I'm providing you a service and value in that process.
Absolutely. Yep. No, that's important. And that's actually where I was going to go with that, is that if the homeowner feels they need to shop, they need to compare options, let them compare options from you, right? If they want to, maybe you want to see an option with a battery, maybe without a battery, or maybe you want to see a comparison of 2 different brand of solar panels. And that is the advantage of the Solar Surge model. Having multiple installers in our network gives us a variety of options. And that's the position that we really want you to be in, is, you're the system designer, or you're kind of think of it like the architect. You can spec out the best plan, the best design for your homeowner. And then depending on which contractor is best suited to deliver on that design, you sign them up accordingly. So that's an advantage of the model. And that's how I will position it is, Mr. Homeowner, let's start with your needs first. My goal is to get the best system for your needs first. And then we can bring in the best contractor who's best qualified to install that system once we get to that point in the process.
Exactly. Joe, real quick, before we move on to the next objection, JW commented here, and pretty much a quote of an objection. So I like this. I don't think solar and a single battery pack is a good choice for me. For a similar investment, I can have an LP generator that's capable of putting out more power, even if it means fuel purchases. It's a great objection. Great comment here. Appreciate it, JW. So again, I think this goes back a little bit to discovery, right? The first part is figuring out what their desires were out of the project. I think the key thing in this language here is I don't think solar and single battery backup. Okay, so what that is really telling me right away is, number one, hey, I don't disagree with you. If you're looking for a whole home backup solution, and you're willing to go get a whole home generator versus a single battery, yes, power output wise, those are not the same comparisons. However, this is a solar with battery backup. So understand what you're getting there, Mr. Homeowner. Number one, you're getting monthly utility bill savings, right? You're getting something, going back to what I said earlier, something that is literally paying for itself right away by producing you energy versus having to buy it from the utility company. Adding in the battery is just giving you additional peace of mind to know that you have a fuel source right then and there that will produce for that battery in the event of an outage. Right? Gone are the days of having to worry about the fuel cost or refilling a propane tank or whatever that may be. Yes, it will be underpowered compared to maybe the generator. And again, we have to know what we're comparing and make sure they're kind of apples to apples. But I'm assuming the conversation would be, yeah, I've got a 20 kilowatt generator and you're quoting me 1 battery. Yes, that will be underpowered compared to the generator. But the other thing to keep in mind, though, as well, is that I often will say, look, with the generator, you're also going to have not just the fuel cost, but you're typically going to have annual maintenance plans to keep up with that properly. It could range anywhere from $500 to $700 per year. So factor that out over maybe the 10 to 15 years of life expectancy for the generator, because that's the next part too, is going to be the overall life expectancy of the product itself. Now, how you're using the battery is going to change the way in which the battery will last and survive, and for how long, and things of that nature too. But I think the big thing I come back to and I explain is the big reason why renewables, both in electric vehicles or solar or battery, is taking a lot of attention right now, is because ultimately the cost of ownership for those things is significantly lower, right? As a Tesla Model 3 vehicle owner myself, the only thing I've ever had to do on the car was tires and windshield washer fluid, right? That was it. Whereas your average vehicle, typically you're having to do gas on a frequent, and of course I'm charging, but gas on a frequent basis, oil changes, brakes more frequently, because regenerative braking in electric vehicles versus ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, so the comparison side by side, everything about EVs is about cost of ownership. It's a lower cost of ownership for an EV. Well, it's a lower cost of ownership for solar and battery than it is for generator. And then if you look at it holistically, the generator solution will be oftentimes a lot more expensive than the battery solution would. So sometimes I just have to unpack that, maybe show them numbers, put things side by side. But that's a lot of times how I handle that objection. Joe, I'm not sure if you would chime into that any differently.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that we address in our 3-step virtual sales process. So again, folks, if you haven't get the free download, it should be on a link right below the video here. But if you're on the path of emergency backup or emergency preparedness, one of the last questions we have here is what caused you to look into solar and battery backup instead of a traditional generator? Now, sometimes you'll hear answers like this. It's like, well, I'm really concerned about the fuel supply, because what happens if the gas lines are bad at the same time the power lines are bad? Some places in Texas had that problem during the deep freeze. I really want to just be more self-sufficient. I want to be more self-contained. Well, they're telling you exactly what the advantage of solar and battery backup is compared to a traditional generator. But Dan, you hit on the big points as well, which is total cost of ownership lifetime. Generators are high maintenance. Oil changes, change the spark plugs, change the air filter, have the technician come out once a year and check it out for you. So, you'll pay for the same cost over the entire lifetime of the system, right? That $500 a year annual maintenance plan adds up over several years. And so, not to mention the fuel cost, the oil change, the spark plugs, all that stuff that comes with an internal combustion engine. But typically, again, I want to get that objection. I want to start handling that objection or identifying that objection during the discovery process. Because if the homeowner says something like, well, I think I can get a lower price on solar with battery backup versus a generator, then I have a chance to kind of correct that and educate right up front and say, look, Mr. Homeowner, I think one of the things you want to ask yourself on this is, are you looking to get the best dollar for dollar payback? Or do you really need this for emergency backup and self-sufficiency reasons? Why are you really doing this? Because if you're doing this for insurance and emergency backup, and we can agree that the solar and the batteries is the most secure solution in the sense that you have physical custody of your energy generation, your energy storage, and it's renewable for as much as you need, that there is going to be a little bit of a price premium for that upfront. But you'll get a 30% federal tax credit, and the lifetime cost of ownership will be less than the traditional generator when you factor in the fuel cost and the maintenance cost. So I like to get that conversation up front and just, don't want to put the customer in a position where they think they should be price comparing those two options, because it's really not an apples to apples price comparison. One gives you much more security and self-sufficiency. The other might give you more instant power, but with more long-term cost for that. So
absolutely. And I mean, the other thing though, too, here, JW, for that comment, oftentimes we're recommending both solutions, right? Like, depends on the type of client. But I know, Joe, over the years, that's an area that you really have built a specialty in, is in the very truly off-grid preparedness type of market, where having one battery is not enough. Most of the projects are 2, 3, sometimes even 4 batteries. And then there's a generator that's interfacing with that system in some capacity. That's how you have legitimate, true preparedness backup, is by having your fuel source, i.e. solar, with battery storage for the immediate service of your home in the event of outages, solar recharging that battery. And then if, gosh forbid, something happens like what happened in Texas years ago, if you don't have ample opportunity to recharge those batteries, now the generator comes in, turn that on, run it for an hour, a couple hours, whatever it may be, recharge, refuel the batteries, and then get back to running off a battery again. That's a very true emergency preparedness setup that I know that you really specialize in. You've done tons of those projects over the years. So sometimes the little objection actually becomes an opportunity to unpack that a little more, and you find out, hey, actually, no, that's what I desire. I want that kind of configuration. It goes back to the price thing, right? A lot of projects that we've sold that have been well over $100,000 for those types of systems, because for the right buyer, for the right person, the price didn't matter. They wanted an outcome. They wanted a lifestyle, and they were willing to pay the price. They had the means, they had the resources.
Yep, absolutely. So don't make price the issue, especially for that type of buyer that wants multiple layers of redundancy and backup protection. Price is not going to be the issue. The issue is going to be getting it done right with a high degree of technical competence and a high degree of confidence that you can transfer to the homeowner.
Yep.
All right, here's another one, Dan, that comes up from time to time. This is probably no surprise to you. I need to talk it over with my wife or my spouse, right?
Yeah.
And so, to the extent possible, guys, we want to get all decision makers involved in the conversation as early as possible. So you'll notice, again, that is one of the discovery interview questions we'll ask is, hey, does anybody else, or should anybody else be involved in this conversation, and then ideally at least get them on the next meeting so that they can attend the presentation as well. But this is another one where I really like delivering the presentation in a recorded screen presentation format, because now let's say I've been interfacing mostly with the husband. I would say that's probably 90% of my clients. I'm interfacing primarily with the husband. But if I deliver my presentation on a recorded screen presentation, now the software that we use is Loom. Those of you who are in Solar Surge University, you know that. You've kind of seen what those recordings look like. But the power of that is that they can then watch my presentation as many times as they need on their own time. And I don't have to rely on one spouse to convey my exact message to the spouse. I can just have them on a video link. They can watch it and play it again on their own time. In fact, I've seen that that's probably the most telling indicator for me of knowing a customer who wants to close is just watching how many times they viewed my proposal. If I go into my library and I see somebody's watched my proposal 5 times or more, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to close. They've invested so much time and interest. It's just going to be a matter of maybe sorting out a few details and then go ahead and get the paperwork done. And Dan, what do you see?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I oftentimes refer to that too, because the husband or wife conversation, I think, like you said, Joe, more times than not, it's the wife, or the husband's inquiring, and I'm hearing the wife might have objections, but really that's kind of like the third person objection, right? It could be anybody. Obviously, we're selling residential solar where it's more driven by a couple, a spouse, that case. But if you're in other lines of solar sales, it could be the board, it could be the finance director, some other type of person that has to make the decision. Again, like you said, Joe, that's why we love the recorded format. I would say even for those of you, and I still do some meetings like this that are doing a live Zoom call, record it. I record every single conversation that I'm on, partially because it helps me stay organized and remember the things we talked about if I need to go reference it again later. But also too, if I know that I have a one-legger, I only have the husband here, I'll say, hey, great. I'll prep the conversation with, hey, at the end of this, I'll send you the recording, share this with whoever you want. That way it's there. Now, the reality of it is too, is that if your meeting lasts an hour, the attention span is probably not going to be all the way there for someone to go watch that entire meeting. So you might still need to take the next step of recording a Loom video to kind of summarize, which I'll do that as well. I might, lead off and say, hey, it was great speaking with you the other day. Just wanted to kind of create a quick 10-minute video to consolidate our meeting here so that you can share it with so-and-so, right? Again, as much as you can be the voice that drives the conversation, the better, just because a lot of times it's going to be very hard for your customer, as knowledgeable as they may be, to properly articulate everything to the other person. I've seen a lot of deals self-implode in that process just because they can't articulate the information all the way there. But to address the conversation or that topic specifically, if someone's like, oh yeah, I think you commented on this one the other day about the solar panels last week, Joe. It could be, oh, my wife doesn't like the look, right? Okay, the aesthetic conversation is very objective. That one's a little hard to handle directly. But you might ask questions, okay, hey, what would your wife enjoy out of this project, right? Hey, is there an outcome that she really cares most about? Is it about how much money you can help save? And maybe, guys, as corny or cheesy as it could sound, sometimes you need to figure out a way to, again, tie some emotion into that money that's being saved. Hey, Bob, I've got you specced out where you're going to be saving, $80, $90 a month. How would your wife like to go out on a date night with you one extra time a month, right? Whatever it may be, right? Like, you can find a way to try to tie into that, build rapport earlier on, do this well in the discovery process. That way it's not coming off as just some weird sales gimmick when you do it later on, but you got to find a way sometimes to make those things correlate, make it translate. Sometimes it's just the thought of the cost rising and going up for forever. That's a big area. So I guess the point of it being is you got to figure out in that particular objection, what things would the other person that's not in the conversation like to see accomplished out of this? What are the things they're motivated by? And find a way to speak to those to help overcome that objection. But the best thing you could do, ask the question earlier so that you can try to set up a proper conversation sooner and avoid all of these landmines that happen late in the process. That's probably where I see the biggest differences between a professional and sort of a rookie, is that we like to ask these questions early to try to handle it early. That way we're not having to play catch up later where the deal just gets so self-destruct mode. Which I've definitely seen. And don't get me wrong, like I'm no expert at that. Sometimes it still happens, but I try to ask those questions way earlier on to handle it way earlier on.
Yeah, and I think that's a common theme that you're going to hear throughout this. If you watch this whole training again, is that the way that we set our process up is designed to preempt the objections or the concerns that we know homeowners have, because we've dealt with hundreds or thousands of them at this point, right? We've done this enough times that we've set our process up so that we've addressed those concerns somehow, some way throughout the conversation, so that when it is time to close, we can hopefully move smoothly into the closing and the paperwork and actually get the project started. So again, for those of you, oh, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, Joe, I just wanted to comment too. And as you get more experience at this as well, I don't know, you probably do this, Joe, to some degree. There's also some questions that are maybe like the lower level questions that I intentionally don't address right away, because I don't want to come off as the person who's just talking at them nonstop. And by the end of it, you kind of ask like, hey, do you have any questions? And they're like, no, because you covered every last thing. Sometimes to help have a proper dialogue, guys, sales psychology is like, give them some questions to still ask. I just allow those questions to be the lower hanging, oh, hey, great question. But I kind of set up for that question to come later, because I wanted to help that engagement in that dialogue. And that just might be sales skills that gets developed as you do more of them and you figure out what your most common questions are. But
Yep. But no, I mean, I think the thing is be prepared, understand what's likely, what the concerns and the holdups are likely to be, and work a process that addresses that smoothly. So, again, for those of you who are in Solar Surge University, you can see the exact process. We teach it step by step, and then we let you watch recordings of us using that process on live calls. So if that's not something that you're yet enrolled in, Solar Surge University is open for enrollment. If you're not sure if that's the right next step for you, then go ahead and take advantage of the free strategy call. That's why we put the invitation on there for the free strategy call. It's just a 30-minute Zoom call. You can chat with me or Dan and even figure out, is Solar Surge University what you need to go from where you are today to where you'd like to be in your solar sales career? Or does it even make sense for you to work as part of the Solar Surge dealer network? Would you like to work with our installers and the markets that we're servicing? So again, we just give us some time to chat through those questions and see if there's a good fit there, or if you're in a good position where you are currently.
Joe, before we move to the last one here, I think we've got one more. Leo, you had another question that I want to make sure we didn't miss it. Heard from one of the largest installers in the country that a quarter of installs require a new roof and a third require main panel upgrades as an additional cost to the customer. Yeah, it certainly can be. And I would always kind of, again, preemptively, I'll ask maybe some questions earlier in the process. The markets that I do a lot of business in, Leo, I don't frequently see main panel upgrades that are required at all. Joe, I don't know about you, but I frankly, I can't think of a project even in this calendar year where I've been told, hey, they have to have a main panel upgrade. I
see it a lot in California. I see it a lot in California.
Yeah. California definitely, I know, is where I was going to say is probably the most common area that I've ever observed it. But in a lot of the other markets, I hadn't seen that. Now, the roof replacement side, I do typically recommend, and most installers would recommend, that if you're within about 5 years, and it could be even 10 years, but if you're within 5 years of needing a new roof, it's probably better to go ahead and do that before the project, just because, one, you don't want to have to deal with the cost of removal and reinstall later. Every installer is going to be a little different on what that pricing is. I've heard some very egregiously crazy pricing before. I can say that the installers that I know that will do that, do it at a pretty reasonable, hey, we need to cover our cost, make a little bit of money on it because it takes away from other opportunities for that day, but it's not anything crazy. And I will say too, again, we're not in the business of giving any tax advice, and you can't take this as gospel, so to speak. So talk to a CPA, an accountant, whoever your tax professional is. But a lot of these things, when you're doing these with or in conjunction with your solar project, could qualify for the federal tax incentives as well. So if you had to get a $20,000 roof and your accountant says, hey, that's fine to file for this, you can get 30% back on that, assuming that that's what your accountant and your advisors say is the right path. So just something to kind of know. Sometimes it could make more sense to just do both at the same time if that's where they're advising from. So just wanted to address that before we move on to the final one here, Joe. I know we're running tight on time as well.
Yeah, I think we're tight on time. So let's go ahead and wrap it up here. By the way, thank you guys for the comments. Really great engagement on the comments here. And then again, that's why we open it up like that. So we can do real-time questions and answers. We want to get maximum value to you. But going back to, what you said at the beginning, Dan, the reason we're here is because we want to bring a high level of professionalism into the solar industry, particularly on the sales side of the industry. And so we're here to teach you publicly how we do things, and also to invite you, if you'd like to take a real deep dive, get into like the internal training of what you would learn if you're working, inside here at the Solar Surge team. That's why we have Solar Surge University. It's over 55 or so videos that you can do. It's all self-paced, on-demand video, so that you can really learn to an expert level how we do our solar sales here at Solar Surge. And like I said, if you want to have a discussion to see if working with us makes sense for you, just go ahead and book the free strategy call. There should be a link below the description on the video here. I'd be happy to chat with you. But folks, we're here every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time live, 1 hour live sales training. I know in the future, we're going to have more to talk about with what's going on with interest rates and alternate financing options. So that's certainly one that we'll put in the queue. Of course, next week coming up is the RE Plus conference in Las Vegas. So we're probably going to have a bit of a special broadcast of some sort for you next week. And we'll have more details coming out on that as soon as we have that. Dan, I guess I'll pass it to you if you'd like to close us out.
Yeah, no, again, everyone, thanks so much for the comments today. Really great engagement. And, we won't have time for it right now in the live comments, but post a comment on the video once this goes on the channel afterwards with maybe any other topics that you really want us to cover. Again, we do these trainings every week, 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific, specifically for, aspiring or current solar professionals, sales professionals. And again, also for our existing clients that want to tune in and just understand the sales practices that go into this. But we're doing this for you guys. We want to bring more transparency and just kind of straightforwardness to how solar sales is done. So it's always a pleasure being here, and appreciate you guys for taking some time to tune in. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. We will probably not see you live, but get you some sort of pretty cool broadcast or edition of this weekly training next week. And hopefully have a lot more good content coming out of the week as well. Excited to be out there in Las Vegas with you, Joe. So with that, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.